Your rounds.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. We pride ourselves in South Dakota with the clean air. We do have challenges, though, at times. If there's a forest fire in California, we suffer from the smoke from that. So we understand when you talk about you want clean air, we want it too. We think we do a good job in our state. Secretary Perner, you've spent decades administering and implementing environmental regulations on both the state and the federal level. Can you discuss in your experiences the differences you've seen in terms of the quality and benefits of regulations that have resulted from a process that incorporates more state input compared to the regulations that have recently been promulgated by the EPA?
Senator Rounds, based on my experience, if you go back and EPA rolled out an issue, and if everybody came to the table and agreed this is a problem and agree this is some options that are viable, things get done. It works. If you don't have that process in place, and the federal government, EPA in this case, is identifying the problem along with the option or a couple options, none of which work for you, then we're left with the lawsuits, the rash of lawsuits that I just mentioned in my testimony.
Talk about ozone a little bit. In South Dakota, we're in compliance. We're one of the few states that's in compliance. You've seen the new numbers coming out. Can you talk a little bit about what that does in terms of a state like South Dakota, where we're one of the 10 that actually complies with the guidelines right now? You mentioned they want to make a change in this down to perhaps below our basic numbers. Can you talk about that a little bit, about how frustrating that is?
Yes, Senator. Ozone, to form ozone, you have to have certain emissions, and it has to react with sunlight, and then you get ozone. So ozone may be in a downstream, may actually form in a downwind state. In South Dakota, we don't simply have, we're a population of what, about 800,000 people? We don't have the sources of the chemicals that react with the sunlight to form the ozone. So the ozone that we do have in South Dakota is either from upwind states or is basically our background levels. And I think based upon what we've seen, the new limit that EPA has come out with is very, very close, if not above, our background levels.
So what's a state like South Dakota supposed to do when we're not in compliance?
We haven't been there yet, thank goodness, but I would assume we would go into a non-attainment status. We would have to try to work with EPA on figuring out what to do, but since we don't have the sources, I don't know what we would do.
In your experience, how would you recommend EPA change its practices of making regulations to better incorporate states' perspectives in the regulatory process? In other words, what are the implications of the EPA enacting broad, overreaching national mandates rather than regulations that take into account the differing characteristics of individual states?
Your hearing today, Senator, your hearing today is on cooperative federalism, and if you read that executive order that I quoted in my testimony, it says in there that one of the principles of federalism is that those decisions that affect people that are made by the unit of government closest to the people are usually the best decisions. And we would say that is still true.
I would suggest that during your tenure from 1979 on, you've gone through multiple administrations. Can you share with us a little bit about what you're seeing right now with regards to either the consultations that are either not there or the directives that are being laid out right now versus the way that it used to work, the way that, whether it was in a Democrat administration or a Republican administration, what's different about what's going on right now?
Senator, I think, Senator Boxer said we're not going to repeal the Clean Air Act, and we're not going to repeal the Safe Drinking Water Act, and we're not going to repeal these environmental federal acts. And I don't think anybody wants to repeal those federal acts. When those acts were put in place, there were real problems in this country. The environment was really, really suffering. And that was the reason those acts were put in place. But in the intervening time period now, tremendous progress has been made. Our water is cleaner. Our drinking water is safer. Our air is cleaner. And so I guess what bothers me some about this is now we're trying to ratchet down to the next environmental problem, and we're getting to such low levels that we're going to spend a lot of time, we're going to spend a lot of money, we're going to spend a lot of resources, and in the end, what's going to be the benefit?
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.